Okay, so I made a video a while ago about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and I never posted it. But last night I took my mom to see, for Mother's Day, I took my mom to see King Arthur. And I thought to myself, you know what, I'll review that, and I'll throw in Guardians of the Galaxy as well. For starters, before I went into King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, I read some of the reviews, and the first thing I noticed about the reviews is that a large portion of critics kept using terms like period drama and kept comment and seemed to be confused that King Arthur Legend of the Sword was a fantasy movie. You know, the movie about King Arthur, it's surprisingly weird that it's a fantasy movie. But it is. The new King Arthur movie is extremely fantasy. And I liked that. I liked it a lot, actually. And my mom loved it, which is about the best you can ask when you take your mom to the movies for Mother's Day, is that she enjoyed the movie. So that turned out pretty great. Charlie Hunnam is great as King Arthur. Jude Law is pretty much killing it as the villain. They do a great job. It's got some incredible action scenes in it. Now, I will say, if you're not a fan of the way Guy Ritchie makes his movies, all loud and rapidly cut and whatnot, you're probably not going to like it. But if you do enjoy Guy Ritchie's movies, then you should absolutely go see King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. It's sad that it's doing poorly at the box office because, honestly, it kind of kicks ass. It's a lot of fun. It's got lots of action in it. Like I said, if you enjoy Guy Ritchie, you'll enjoy the movie. And honestly, a lot of the fantasy, a lot of the touches they make onto the fantasy elements are pretty cool. They do take some liberties with the mythology, but people have been taking liberties with mythology since day one, so it's not really much of a surprise. Overall, I give it a B plus. I'll go into why I don't give it an A in the spoilers in a minute. But real quick, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Also awesome. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is probably the most complete movie that Marvel has ever made. There's a thing that Marvel has consistently dropped the ball in their movies on villains. Even their best villains aren't completely up to par. Like, even their best villains in their movies are kind of like, kind of just there. But with this movie, not that way. There's actually a couple of different villains, and each of them actually is well done. And very well done. The movie itself, the whole movie's about fathers. Basically, biological versus adoptive. And that's the subtext of the movie. First of all, let's applaud for a Marvel movie having subtext. Because it's about time they started putting that in there, you know? I'm teasing you, Marvel. Seriously. Subtext. It's the difference between making something that's just fun and making something that is art. Okay, anyways, moving right along. My only real complaints about Guardians of the Galaxy are only really 3 complaints, and they're all extremely minor. Some of the jokes are pretty forced. And some of the jokes are pretty lame. Some of the jokes made me groan. Some of the jokes, I was like, we could have done the movie without this. But that's fairly standard fare for even the best of Marvel's movies. They can't let you get through a movie without throwing a bunch of jokes in your face for no apparent reason sometimes. Also, Nebula. Her character's pretty good, except sometimes, especially when they're trying to make her more likable, she has this very almost made for Hot Topic and Tumblr feel to her, which kind of I found vaguely annoying and off-putting. The one other minor complaint I will get into is just the fact that certain elements of it are very predictable. I was never surprised by anything the movie was doing, but it was so well done, I didn't mind the fact that it was fairly cliche. And the subtext kept me interested throughout. So I give Guardians of the Galaxy an A. Not an A+, because like I said, I did have those complaints. I almost gave it an A-, but I want to give it an A because I do think it is the most complete movie that Marvel has made. So I feel like that deserves an A. All right, now we're going to go into spoilers. So if you're not up for seeing spoilers, you can turn off the video now. All right, so King Arthur Legend of the Sword, real quick. The reason I give it a B plus instead of an A, well, A minus, there's a couple of different things. One, some of Guy Ritchie's sort of standard Guy Ritchie type edits that he's sort of famous for, they're very cool, but every once in a while he'll do one where if you like think about what's actually happening, you'll be like, that edit is nonsense. Narrative-wise, it's not. It's very cool visually, it's very stylistic, but if you actually think about what you're watching, it's kind of like, that doesn't make any damn sense. Like there's this part where King Arthur he's explaining to them exactly what's going to happen when they go and talk to these noblemen and try and get them to join them. And my problem with that scene is it's not clear if they actually went and talked to those nobles and it went exactly how he told them it was, or if that scene is him telling them how it's going to go and then they just decide to not do it. It's never completely clear whether or not they actually enlist the help of those nobles or not. It's just kind of a weird edit. And if they do go and do this thing with the nobles, does that mean essentially he tells them exactly how it's going to go, and then they go to do the thing, and it does go exactly how he tells them it's going to go, and he basically tells them the same thing twice? It's not the same thing twice for us as the audience because we're watching both things at the same time. What I'm describing probably doesn't make sense unless you see it. So, but if you watch it, you'll figure out what I'm talking about. Because it's just weird Guy Ritchie edit. It's cool and stylistic, but doesn't really make sense. The other thing is Jude Law is killing this movie. And, like, he's a great villain. Like, he's motivated. He, like, makes these choices that are very villainous. And, like, you can see him, like, the way the wheels turn. He does a great job as the villain in this movie. Which is why it's vaguely disappointing that the final fight between him and King Arthur is not so much Jude Law as, like, a super buff, magically enhanced CGI version of essentially the satanic version of Jude Law's character. And, like, the movie ties into the fact that that is Jude Law's character, so there's still some of the resonance there, but I can't help but feel that that final battle would have been more powerful if we could have felt more of the presence that Jude Law was already bringing to the part. So I kind of have to dock some points for that, because it just doesn't feel as effective as it could have been from a character and storytelling standpoint. But honestly, this movie is highly underrated, and you should definitely check it out. I do recommend it. Even my mom loved it. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Loved the movie. Absolutely did. That being said, the ending is kind of obvious. His father comes together with his father, and his father, of course, basically decides, well, if you're not going to join me and do this and take over the world and reform everything in the image of ego, then I'm just going to use you as a battery. So he hooks him up as a battery. And of course, while he's hooking him up as a battery, he's taunting him. And of course, while he's taunting him, suddenly, Peter Quill remembers the power of love. And not the song. Although they could have, no, that would have been too expensive to use the song from the soundtrack of Back to the Future. Also wouldn't have made sense chronologically. But the point is, he remembers, the power of love. And the power of love gives him the ability to fight his father. Which is fine. It's well done. But, like, I saw it coming. And it's super cliche. Like, it's the most cliche thing they could have possibly done there. And there's a joke. Nebula has this moment there's also this one joke that really irritated me, where Nebula has this moment where she goes in this very intense monologue about how she's going to hunt down her sister and get her revenge. And the guy who used to be on Gilmore Girls, his character, the space pirate, I forget what his name is. Cracklin? It's something like that. But anyways, she has that monologue, and then, like, he immediately follows up with, like, the lamest, most inappropriate joke I can possibly think of. Where she goes in that speech, and then he's suddenly like, I just thought you'd use the money to buy a necklace. Because they're talking about how she's going to spend the money to wreak revenge on her sister, and he says, I just thought you'd use the money to buy, like, a nice necklace, to show off to the girls. And, like, when he said that joke, my first thought was, seriously? Really? Like, what about her character says to you that she's gonna buy a necklace? And I don't know, it felt sexist and out of place for her character. And like, is Cracklin that stupid? I mean, I understand that his character's kind of like a dumb sidekick, but like, is he that stupid? Um, Oh, I gotta take a moment to talk about something that is great about the movie, which is Yondu. There's a scene in the movie where Yondu takes his like magic arrow and just murders a whole bunch of people. Like a lot of Disney movies, there's a ton of murder in this movie, but unlike a lot of Disney movies, you actually kind of know what's happening. People die all the time in Marvel movies, and Marvel just kind of like, don't look over there where people are dying all the time. But in this movie, no, they're actually dying on screen, which some of it's pretty intense. But there's this scene where Yondu just like takes out all the pirates with his magic arrow, and it's insanely awesome, and you got to see it. The the movie comes down to the relationship between Peter Quill and Yondu and Kurt Russell's character, and it's about biological father versus adoptive father, and it's just great. And you should definitely see both of them. I definitely recommend both of them. I know a lot of critics are hating on King Arthur, and I get it to a certain extent. Um, Guy Ritchie edit, probably not for everybody. The way he makes his movies, probably not for everybody. I enjoy it. I've liked almost all his movies. Never saw that crappy one he made with Madonna, but I don't feel like I need to. Um, so if you like Guy Ritchie movies, you will enjoy his King Arthur movie. That's all I really have to say about that. Also, yes, critics, it's a fantasy film. Sort of deal with it. Check out Guardians of the Galaxy. If you haven't already, you probably have. You probably have. They're both fantastic. Check them out. That's all I got to say.